Vision is one of the functions of the human brain. So it means that these chemicals find themselves through mom, through the umbilical cord, into the baby, into the developing brain, and damaging functions there. And the baby is born already with a problem.
Wipe this off.
Jenna's mom was at least warned she was working with toxic chemicals. Manufacturers are obliged to release toxicology data in the workplace. When these same chemicals are used in the home, the exposure is lower, but no one knows what effect they may have, and there's no obligation to inform us. Dr. Corin isn't the only specialist to be increasingly concerned about what living in such a chemical society might be doing to our kids. Respiratory illness is the leading cause of admission to hospital for children. Childhood asthma has jumped 400% over the last 20 years. And after injuries, cancer is now the leading cause of death among children aged 5 to 9.
There's increasing evidence of links between those kinds of chronic health effects in children and a certain range of chemicals in our environment.
Can you smell?
Yeah. So we went to see a chemist, Dr. Virginia Solaris. She's an indoor air quality expert. And we asked her, what's in some of these products being marketed to young families? This is one product we're looking at, LYSOL antibacterial action. It does actually list ingredients, ethanol, 79%. And not just any ethanol, says Solaris, it's denatured ethanol. She's put together a book for us full of data sheets which list the hazards of specific chemicals in the workplace. Again, there's nothing like this available on the effect of these chemicals when used in the home. Here's what Solaris discovered about denatured ethanol.
May cause irritation of eyes and mucous membranes, may cause central nervous system depression if inhaled or ingested.
So, we now know everything that's in the Lysol, do you think? No, there's more? Yep, says Solaris. There's also alkyl dimethyl benzyl ammonium chloride.
This is a class of compounds that act as a disinfectant or biocide.
Which means it's a pesticide.
It's harmful by inhalation, ingestion, and through skin contact.
So we've learned that in this can, there are products that can cause skin irritation or irritation to the lung, even neurological implications. And yet here they're saying to, spray where kids are, to use it every day or at least use routinely. Is that a good idea?
Well, that's something that the parents should think about. Do they want to spray the air that people are breathing, or the kids, the toys or surfaces that the children are touching, do they want them sprayed?
Okay, now this is Clorox disinfecting wipes. It says to wipe surfaces throughout the house, kitchen and bathroom. Playpens.
It lists two products, dimethylbenzyl ammonium chloride and dimethylethylbenzyl ammonium chloride.
Again, like in the Lysol, more pesticides with possible harmful effects.
If you find that it has an ingredient which is a chemical, you can't even pronounce it, you don't know what it is, you don't know how it can affect you, I think it's about time you think, should I be using this?
Now here is another product. This is Pledge. There's no ingredients listed at all.
It has silicones and it has butane gas.
Like in a lighter?
Yes, and propane.
Like in the barbecue?
Exactly.
So what do they do, butane and propane?
May be harmful if inhaled. Eye irritant and narcotic, meaning it can affect the brain.
And then there's the glass cleaners. What's in them?
Some of them have what are called glycol ethers. There's concern over these products because for workers who are exposed occupationally, they've been seeing some reproductive effects, and so in the semiconductor industry, they're being phased out.
What about all the laundry detergents and fabric softeners? I think people assume that they're safe. Is there any cause for concern with chemicals in those?
You'd be amazed at the number of chemicals that are used in detergents. They have chemicals to prevent the dirt from sticking back onto the clothing. They've got chemicals to oxidize, and of course you've got the perfumes. You may not be rinsing away all of those chemicals.
What kind of exposure do you need to those chemicals before it's harmful?
We don't really know.
But we know at some level it can be harmful.
That's right.
There's a labeling system in the workplace. that has symbols for both acute and chronic hazards and statements that are supposed to warn you about those hazards. It will disclose whether it contains a carcinogen in it or a reproductive toxin or some other chronic health hazard. Some of these same chemicals are in consumer products, but there's nothing on the label like that for the consumer product.
All household cleaners fall under the Hazardous Products Act, which is almost 40 years old. They're also regulated by something called the Consumer Chemicals and Containers Regulations. Labels are required to provide hazard symbols like poison and flammable, and they have to give information about first aid treatments for those ingredients. But there's no requirement to list other chemicals that could cause long-term health effects, and no warnings that say anything like may cause respiratory problems.
People assume that if it's on the shelf, it's been tested, it's safe. And you can't make that assumption all the time. You can't. Not with the regulatory framework that we have in place.
People make that assumption because they trust the government agencies are actually looking after that.
Yeah, and they shouldn't make that assumption with respect to the Hazardous Products Act in particular. That's a federal law that desperately needs to be updated. It only reacts to problems after they've been identified. And
when people start getting sick?
Sick or dying. I mean, the kinds of regulations that have been put in place have to do with where children's sleepwear has caught fire, or cords have gotten around their necks, or we found or lead in the paint on cribs, or all of those kinds of things. Those regulations were not put in place until after serious and or fatal health problems occurred.
There's some lapsus, some gap in the way we think. I would expect my government, my regulatory process, to expect such tests to be done before something is approved to be used where small children are growing.
While Dr. Corrin's regulatory process, Health Canada sent us this email where they say the responsibility for assessing the hazards associated with a chemical product is that of the manufacturer or importer. We wanted to ask Health Canada about its role and about some of the concerns raised in this story, but they refused repeated requests for an on-camera interview. The makers of LYSOL, Clorox and Pledge said they were unavailable for an interview, and so did their trade association.
Just doing a casual count, I noticed more than 10 different types of cleaners in your home.
Meanwhile, back at the Sols, Sean has just finished advising Amanda to cut back on some of her cleaning products.
So I think I'm going to go through all of them and try and find one or two that will work. But also another way I might do it too is to try and see what natural products are out there.
And if there's a demand for that, the industry will provide it.
So Amanda Sol has decided to cut down on the chemicals in her home. But she'll have to figure it out on her own. For the time being, at least, the government and manufacturers are under no obligation to help her.
What if there were safer, better, less expensive alternatives? Would you investigate? Ask the person who gave you this video for more information. Let's stop poisoning our children.